Richards, United States Naval Reserve Lieutenant. Where I was working, I was accused of skipping my duty because all of the ladies that worked there had their sons in. I chose the Navy at that point in time. I applied for a commission and was sent to the Army Navy Engine Training School in Hartford, where I got my first introduction to military procedures. Beyond that, the Army Navy Engine School never really materialized because they had need for officers on aircraft carriers. The people I was with were all graduate engineers. I happened to be sent to the Arresting Gear and Catapult Training School in Philadelphia. When that went over, I was sent to Farmington, Washington for pre-commissioning detail on what turned out to be the USS Shamrock Bay, which was then called a baby carrier. The baby carrier was commissioned and went into service in San Diego as training for new pilots. That went on for a few months. We had our fun then. Most of the pilots did beautifully. Occasionally, they hit the deck. No injuries, fortunate. From that point, we went through Panama, got into a carrier escort division for Africa. We stopped at Casablanca, took off some planes that we were carrying, none of them airborne, and took on some other planes, Nazis, if you will. They were in working condition, but we took them back to the States along with the division that we came over with. We encountered German submarines on the way back, fortunately never close enough for any actual combat. Once in the States, Hampton Roads, Virginia was a repair area where we lost part of our flight deck due to a storm. After that, we went through the Panama again and headed, the order said, west. West ended up being the Admiralty Islands, south of south of Australia. It was just prior to the Philippine campaign, which we also participated in, our first exposure to kamikazes. Fortunately, we came out without a problem. Sarajevo Straits, between two of the Pacific Islands, was our first encounter with Japanese. We didn't see them, but they were in the hills taking pot shots. Our sun deck procedures was suddenly interrupted. We left there to a place called Ulysses Lagoon, which was in the middle of the Pacific. I think at the last count there was 12 or 14 carriers there awaiting our next operation, which turned out to be Okinawa. That was the usual activity, flying every day in support of aircraft operations from the Army. We secured Okinawa and went back out to Ulysses for additional orders, which didn't take very long, Iwo Jima being the next. We steamed there until we ran out of food, which I think was something close to 3 months, 2.5, 3 months. That was pretty much our activity. We went back to Pearl Harbor. We went to San Diego to renew some of our acquaintance when we went through there sometime before. At that time, VJ Day was mentioned, and that was, for all intents and purposes, the end of my war. I was detached, stayed in the reserves for a while until I moved from my hometown, Pontiac, Michigan, to Chicago, where I had to leave the reserves because it was too far away from where I was living. That's the end of my story. I appreciate your listening.
John Girolamo, gunner's mate, United States Navy. On D-Day was the proudest day of my life. At 4 o'clock in the morning, all the large ships, the battleships, cruisers are starting to bombard the coast. At daybreak, as far as the eye could see, there was nothing but ships. Overhead, squadrons of planes coming and going, dropping the bombs. Couldn't have been a prouder day. One of the sad days, December 14th or 15th in '44, Glenn Miller's plane went down. And we were one of the ships assigned to zigzag and try and find him. Now, we had foul weather gear on, and if he did go down, he didn't live over a few minutes because we were freezing. Another proud day, my second ship, a transport. We were in Pearl Harbor practicing for the invasion of Japan, dropping all the Higgins boats. And I see my brother, who was a United States Marine. Now that's about as rare as you can get. Two brothers meet like that, and we spent 3 days together. So instead of invading Japan, they dropped the bombs. We brought the occupation troops in. And that's the end of my little story.
Combat Engineers, Army. The rank was Staff Sergeant. The name is Joseph A. Girolamo. I was drafted, but here's what happened. I was on defense work, and I was deferred. And so while I was on defense work, I was learning to be a die maker. We were training machinists for the Navy. And I thought, well, I could join the Navy and finish my course. I thought, well, I could get by with the bell-bottom trousers, but I thought, where's the machine shop? Down on the bottom of that ship. So I waited. In the meantime, they transferred me to another building. I was off for defense work. They had me drafted. Where did I serve? Africa, Italy, and France. Well, what most people don't know, when we started World War II, we didn't have an army to speak of. We had one A Army, Second Army, Third Army. People like myself and others. I had ROTC training. The fact I had it when I went into the service, within a few days, I'm a squad leader, corporal. In 3 months, I'm already a buck sergeant. They sent me on to 3 categories, trained an outfit here, trained an outfit, a third outfit. That's how people like myself, other ROTC people trained in the Army. Speaking of my brother, I have all the respect in the world for the Navy. It took them 21 days to get me from here to Casablanca in a Liberty cargo ship. 2 meals a day. They thought we were on a diet. In the service in Italy, just by chance, we spent 2 months in Naples. My father came from that area, 50 miles from there. We're Italian-American. And I got a chance to get a 2-day pass to see my relatives, grandfather, grandmother, 3 cousins, and an aunt. So also, I was in Patton's old 7th Army. See, when I was in Africa, he was in Sicily and he slapped that soldier boy. Well, they got rid of him. But I was 7th Army from that day until the day I got discharged from the military. And matter of fact, as of today, I'm still involved with the military. I spent time with ROTC Churchill High School, the Air Force cadets. I have an office there, a desk. I volunteer time and I work with the Air Force cadets. That keeps me going. I'm 85 years old and I'm still kicking. The average day, well, I'll give you something that I really don't like. When you're in the staging area, I was in Naples, you're there either prepare for another job or you wait for an assignment. Well, Clark, the 5th Army had troubles in northern Italy. We're engineers, we have our trucks, our trailers and all. Our company commander volunteered us to do flunky work for the 5th Army. For a couple of months, we're hauling stuff up there. But our job was, we were involved with small bridges, not them huge ones you see. You need an airfield, you need a road, we do it. In Africa, in Iran, in northern Africa, we built a large crossway runway. I thought I knew why we were building it, because there were 2 Limeys planes, 2-seater planes with 2 Winger planes. The one guy was, boy, he was just bouncing around. The other guy found the lens. I thought we were building for cross windage. Actually, we were building that so planes could leave from there to France, to Italy, wherever they needed them. So that was one of our big jobs.
I'm Ann Whitworth. I was born and raised in Scotland, about 10 miles from Edinburgh, and there was a great shortage of men because Britain had been at war in the Middle East for some time prior to this period, and they needed people women to fill the ranks, to help fill the ranks. And I always remember going into Edinburgh, this long room, and parading down the hall, this huge hall, to 3 very stern-looking naval officers and giving all my data. And anyway, I was called up, and I was sent to a place where they tested you, give you an aptitude test, and I was selected to go as an aircraft plotter. Do you know what an aircraft plotter is? Well, radar had just shortly been introduced by a fellow called Watson Watt. I'm sure we would never have won the wars we did without it, but because it could detect planes coming from enemy territory within 100 miles. And so I became an aircraft plotter. And I was sent to, first of all, to southwest England, where we were surrounded by American troops. Now you remember that General Eisenhower planned the whole thing, and he did that in a castle in Scotland called Tantell. I'm giving this place a good never mind. Anyway, he planned this whole thing from Tantallon Castle. The top floor is dedicated to his life, and there's recordings of his voice where he dictated what was supposed to be what as far as the whole war operations were concerned. And you can go there and listen to them. And anyway, I was sent to southwest England, and there wasn't much action there. And unfortunately, there was a very, I shouldn't be mentioning this, but there was a very, there was an officer there, tall, good-looking, very superior type, who had designs on me, I think, and when he finally asked me to come, well, he used to dictate over the phone to me. I could take shorthand, and he used to dictate over the phone, and I'd have to type, which wasn't my classification. And when he finally asked me to make his bed, I thought, well, that's it, so I reported him. So I was sent to south East England, the Dover area, which was the most dangerous area in the whole of Britain, because right across the water, the English Channel, was France, which was occupied territory then. And I'm trying to think back, it's so long ago. Anyway, the planes used to come over at night, and all our operations were done in the evening, because that's when the planes came over, although we were shelled by day. Of course, they were on their way to London, to bomb London and all the American troops and everything else. And so it was our job to pass the plots to the gun sites so they could be shot down. And I was there for about 2 years. And of course, when the American planes would go out and bomb the sites from which these planes came, the enemy would move their base further up the coast. They went from Cherbourg up to the different areas in France, and we would move to intercept. We went from Dover to Deal to Canterbury, Canterbury up to a place called Thorpe-le-Socren, and so on. And it was interesting. We were just completely surrounded by American troops. There were very few British. I think that, of course, there the Air Force was, and they could go out, but for the Army, they were all the west side, because at that time, I think that General Eisenhower had planned that they were going to Normandy, and they landed in Normandy, whereas the British troops were from the eastern area of England, went down over the Channel, and they landed on beaches called Gold and Silver and whatever. Anyway, oh dear, I think. So it was a very interesting experience, very dangerous, because I remember being one day on pay parade, and we were in a stone-built seafront house, minus doors and windows because they'd been all blitzed out. and I was on pay parade, and a shell landed on the ocean just about 100 yards from where I was standing, and sea came in, the spray of the ocean came in in the doors, and I was completely drenched. I managed to collect my pay. I wasn't going without that. So so we went up up the coast, and wherever the enemy moved, we moved to intercept. And as I say, radar was amazing. I don't really think we'd have made it without it, because the Luftwaffe at that time had been completely blitzed. And so anyway, after that, I was sent to, after the cessation of hostilities, I was sent to New Yorkshire, which was a very bleak place in the English moors. And we got, I think they were trying to rehab us because we got music appreciation classes. We were sent to places where we could recoup. And and then I was chosen, of all things, I was chosen to go on the Victory Parade in London, which was I was completely amazed at, because there were only very few from each area of the forces selected to go there. And I'll never forget that day. Of course, America had its parade in New York, and this was in London. I'll never forget that. It was, we passed, we started at the castle, and we went right down the Pall Mall, past the King and Queen and the Princesses, and General and Churchill, Mountbatten, and all the other dignitaries. And then there was a flyover by the legless pilot, Douglas Bader. And it was really very sad. But it was a wonderful wonder. It was a wonder that we made it. It was, I mean, Hitler he thought he was invincible, and of course that was the end of it, and it's the end of my story.
Well, my name is Dick Carvel, and I came out of service as a technician, 4th grade. I was very fortunate. I had worked for the telephone company for a year when I was drafted, so as I say, I was fortunate to end up in the signal company, attached to the 9th Air Force, and spent my time in England, France, Belgium, and up into Germany a little bit. And really, that as I say, I was just being in the right place at the right time. I was in Paris 7 days after it was liberated, mainly because the plan was for the 9th Air Force, which was fighter bombers. They would move them up. Originally, they went up right behind the front lines. And the support troops, like I was in, were back. And then as the front moved, we leapfrogged the fighter planes, so we would go up. We ended up within about 10, 15 miles of the front. I mean, good thing they didn't try to make soldiers out of us, but I spent my time, as I say, in Signal Corps and communications. And here again, by being fortunate, when the war in Germany, in Europe ended, they were going to take the flying forces out of the 8th Air Force and the ground forces out of the 9th, and more or less transfer us out to the 29th with B-29 in Japan. Well, we were on our way home when Japan quit. So after being home for furlough, they sent me a telegram, told me to take an extra 15 days, and then they didn't need me, so they kicked me out. So I actually only spent about 33 months in service, so I was rather fortunate. And when we got up there, we'd work like a Dickens in the morning, so we'd go to Paris in the afternoon, and of course got a chance to visit all the Notre Dame and all those kind of places. And I think one of the biggest things that, well, it kind of shocked me originally. One of the times we got talking with a young Frenchman, and he said, okay, well, we've quit now, but says, we'll be fighting Germany again in another 30, 40 years. And I thought, gosh, what an attitude. But when you stop and think about it, history-wise, they'd been fighting Germany about every 30, 40 years. That it was a change, but it was, well, it shows the difference in our attitudes. I mean, we have one impression of things, and those people that have fought over there for all those years, they had a little different. But it was very interesting. And of course, we always have to tell, we had one older fellow in our outfit. Of course, most of us young kids, 20, 21, 22, and Tommy Buckaloo, the fellow, came out of Oklahoma I think he'd been a rum runner, and I don't know what his background, but he was a natural storyteller. I heard him tell the same stories, but every time had a little different twist. And one morning, Tommy didn't show up. We thought, what's happened here? So we started trying to cover up. Well, come to find out, he'd been in Paris and going to catch a ride back with some truck driver that was hauling munitions up to Patton up at Strasbourg. And the guy had 3 bottles of brandy. Well, Tommy didn't get back until the next day. But, you know, some of those kind of things that made for fun and made for an interesting, but yeah, it was very interesting. I mean, I got back over, I've seen back to a couple of times, went back to Europe to see some of the places that I'd been at, because when I was in England, I was near Bath, and then we were up near Oxford, and it was different things that were very interesting.
Bernard M. Sallott, S-A-L-L-O-T. I was in the Navy. And after we graduated, 3 of us from school, from college, we went to work for a while. And then things were getting kind of tough, so the draft thing was creeping up on us. So we thought, and I said, well, you know, if I'm going to go into service and die, I'm not going to do it in the mud. I'm going to do it in a bed on a ship. So, but they rejected me at first because I was 8 pounds overweight. They took the other 2 guys. One of them was on the destroyer that the submarine sank up with Greenland before we were ever in war. But he was saved, and the other guy was saved. And I got officially, I think I'm signed up in early January of 42, right after Pearl Harbor and so forth. And then I was sent down to the diesel school, engineering school, and then I was sent to fire control school and so forth. And then I wound up being the gunnery officer for the Uriah P. Levy, which was one of the first destroyer escorts ever built. It was better than the destroyer because, well, it was easier to use, and so forth. And then we went down through the Panama Canal and out to the Solomon Islands and so forth, and spent time going up and down the slot. On the way out, we had about 400 members of the crew, and about 12 of the officers never had much training. There were only about 2 that was the captain and the, what do you call it, and I was the gunnery officer and so forth. And we were on our way out to the Solomon Islands, heading between Cuba and Haiti for the Panama Canal. And we had all these youngsters that really were in the Navy were there, and I was the officer at the deck, and we were down there, and this guy said, "Sir, could you come over here, please, for a moment?" I said, "Yes, sir. What do you want?" "Would you tell me what those 3 white tracks are out there that are moving toward us?" I said, "Oh my God, they're torpedo tracks." You know, and all that stuff, and so forth. So we went on through. We went out there with about 14 rounds of ammunition for our main guns, and we had 3 1917 torpedoes on the ship. We weren't sure worked, but 3 of us got out there, and we were out in Solomon Islands for many years in Tulagi and Guadalcanal and up and down the slot and so forth. And I came home. My wife, we had a son, and he was born, and he was in the hospital, and there was an accident in the hospital, and he died. I never saw him. And she took care of it, but I finally got home for that. And then they sent me to fire control school and all that stuff. And then I was gunnery officer on the William T. Powell, which was the next one. And we had all the necessary things and so forth. And then that ship stayed in the Atlantic, and we used to take 100-ship convoys along with about 10 or 11 other protection ships into the Mediterranean or into the Red Sea or into Algiers or the North Sea or whatever. And that was the William T. Powell. I was the gunnery officer on that. And we were doing quite a bit of work in that and so forth. And we were, our ship, the William T. Powell, we were in Brownsville, Texas, being outfitted with the latest equipment, radar and everything. Excuse me. They were preparing us for the invasion of Japan. And they instructed us that there would be 12 ships like us out there, and we would form a net in front of the group that was going to invade Japan. And if we were shot up or sunk or anything else, don't expect to be saved, you're done, period, that's it, so forth. And we were getting new radar, new guns and so forth on it. And then of course Japan signed off on the treaty, and we had I think we had 14 officers aboard. We had the captain and the executive officer, and I was the gunnery officer. And 12 of the 14 had enough points to get out of service. I lacked 2 weeks of points to get out, and I was told that I was the next senior-wise to become captain of the ship, and I have to sign up for 2 more years and spend it with the ship in the China Sea and so forth. We had enough political pull that I got the extra 2 weeks of points, and I managed to get out and so forth. But I had 5 years in the Navy and was gunnery officer, and we had all kinds of problems in Guadalcanal and up and down the slot, up by Iwo Jima and up in the Philippines, and then we went into Pearl Harbor, and we were over in the Mediterranean, the North Sea, up off Greenland and so forth. I went through 2 hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean and 1 in the Pacific, so forth. We almost didn't make it, but we did, so forth. And but it was almost 5 years in the Navy. That was me.